In the Philippines, one of the common cries of the Filipino masses is the lack of justice given to the poorer members of the community. The notion is that legal services are expensive and only the rich can afford it. People are not aware that they can avail of legal services from lawyers for free or pro bono. Pro bono or pro bono publico is a Latin phrase for professional work that is done voluntarily or without payment. This is where the public attorney's office comes into play. The Public Attorney's Office, or more commonly known as PAO, is a government agency that aims to provide legal assistance to those who otherwise cannot afford it. Aside from the PAO, there are other agencies and organizations that offer pro bono or free legal assistance. One of which is Legal Aid Program Mindanao, or LEAP Mindanao, a program that has partnered with local NGOs to assist law schools in Mindanao and Palawan to set up legal aid clinics to provide free legal aid to indigent clients who are eligible to avail of pro bono legal services. Are there requirements needed for a person to avail of pro bono services? Aside from PAO, where else can people go to ask for pro bono aid?
Good evening. You're watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno. Tonight, we will be speaking with a lawyer from the U.S. who is involved in non-government work here in the Philippines. This organization has made its mission to provide legal clinics in provinces around Mindanao and Palawan.
Our guest for tonight is Attorney Patrick Costello, Associate Professor at the University of Idaho, College of Law, and a volunteer of the Attorney for Legal Aid Philippines Mindanao, or LEAP Mindanao. Good evening, and thank you for being with us, Pat.
Thank you for having me, Karen.
This is really an honor. Yeah. I mean, a step up for Legal HD, because not only do we have an expert, an attorney, but also an overseas attorney who also works both in the U.S. and here in the Philippines.
I know. And so you've been in the Philippines, what, a month now?
1 month.
Wow, okay. How you like it so far? At least meeting a lot of lawyers in the IBP, in the Creative Bar of the Philippines.
I am enjoying it very much. I really am very taken with the Philippines, the people and the countryside, the scenery, and the food. It's been great.
Okay. Well, yeah. I'm glad to hear that, and I hope you stay longer and continue this mission that you embarked on.
Yeah, so it's a very commendable mission.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I guess we can clarify to the people here, our topic is on pro bono services. So to the extent that you've also practiced in the U.S., maybe you can give us insights on what you've seen are the differences between access to pro bono services compared to the U.S. and here in the Philippines. Maybe this would give us also suggestions on how to improve
our own system, pro bono, providing free legal services,
Well, one similarity in both countries is that the demand for legal services among people who can't afford to hire lawyers far exceeds the resources, whether it be PAO or pro bono attorneys or legal aid lawyers in the U.S. or attorneys who are working pro bono. One thing in our country, as we discussed before the program began, is that we use an incentive to encourage lawyers to give of their time without pay by having a bar program that provides free malpractice insurance coverage for them when they're representing indigent clients pro bono, so that they don't have to worry about being sued by those clients and having to respond in damages. I don't think that would necessarily work here because, as I understand it from talking to you two, that's not a big consideration for lawyers in the Philippines.
Well, actually, because we don't really have a strong malpractice law in the first place. So if for you, I mean, if you're a client who you feel is you've been represented by a negligent lawyer, it's hard to file a malpractice law case because we just have a very broad law on under the civil code on damages. Although here, you can complain to the Supreme Court by filing one, either a disbarment case or an
Administrative,
administrative
like
case
administrative
against
case.
the lawyer who does wrong. But, you know, Pat, in the Philippines, every year, there's been an increase in the number of students, law students, and a number of students who take the bar exam. So there's also been an increasing number of lawyers year by year. But this does not translate to providing free legal services to Filipinos.
Right.
In the U.S., how is that, apart from the malpractice insurance, how is that balanced? Like, how
Okay.
does the U.S. make sure that people
People
can
are
access
involved, yeah.
legal
Well, we don't. I mean, we're like the Philippines.
Oh.
There are many more people that need the services than are able to access them. So I don't want to paint a picture that we are able to provide to meet the need, because we aren't. But we do, like the Philippines, have in our rules of professional responsibility a goal of 50 hours per year per attorney for volunteer pro bono work. It's mostly aspirational. Most states don't mandate it. You don't have to report it, for example.
You don't get penalized.
You
for-
don't get sanctioned.
Yeah,
They
sanctioned.
don't. And as a result, the percentage of attorneys that provide true pro bono, by which I mean providing direct legal services to indigents, is only like 10 or 15% in many states. And that isn't to say that attorneys in the U.S. don't volunteer their time in other ways. Like me, on this project, this is pro bono, the work I'm doing here in the Philippines, but I'm not providing direct legal services to poor people. So attorneys in the U.S. do that. They serve on nonprofit corporation boards. They do a lot of volunteer work for good causes, but it's not what would meet the definition of pro bono in
Yeah.
our rules.
I was telling Pat earlier, I'm also a member of the New York Bar, and I think one of the things that they do well, at least in New York, is that they reach out to lawyers. You really get personalized messages and emails giving you a list of the
Encouraging you
current
to,
programs they have so that you can
Involved.
participate in providing free legal services to the
I guess
communities.
my-
They even
my-
show which courts.
My question is, Pat, if those who are volunteering are either law students or lawyers who will not obviously get paid for the legal services they have, and that, as we know, the service of lawyers, we charge clients by our timesheets.
That's
right?
correct.
So how do you ensure, assuming that there's a student who is going to volunteer, or there's a lawyer who's willing to provide the legal service, how do you ensure the quality, or who checks on that? Because obviously the motivation for financial gain is not there, and you're spending a lot of time, which you could use for something that will be more financially beneficial for you. How do you, apart from the malpractice insurance, is there kind of a policing body that ensures the quality of the legal services that's provided?
Not that's separate and distinct from the way that we police the quality of legal work in general. For example, to focus on students for a moment, you mentioned students, how do we ensure the quality of the work they're doing? The student practice rule here in the Philippines, similar to the one in my state, requires that law students be supervised by an experienced attorney when they're providing legal services. And so hopefully, and that's what I did at my law school. I was the supervising attorney in our clinical program. So hopefully that person is making sure the students provide competent representation, because their license, the supervising attorney's license, is on the line. As far as private attorneys doing pro bono work, the reporting back by the judge, for example, that they appear in front of would be one way. Malpractice suits would be the other. Complaints to the bar. We have bar counsel in each of our states that polices attorney misconduct, whether it's competence or dishonesty or some other issue. So that would be the mechanism.
Because you're still bound by your oath as a lawyer.
You're bound by your oath as a lawyer, and ultimately that's your own professionalism is the biggest guarantee.
But it's a good thing you mentioned the supervision of law students and providing legal services. For viewers out there, the University of the Philippines Law School has a similar program. They call it the UP Office of the Legal Aid. And for those viewers out there, if you're an indigent client, meaning you don't have sufficient money to pay for litigation, this is an option you can look into. You'll be represented by students, law students of the UP College of Law, and they're under the supervision of real lawyers. So we have more things to discuss.
Yeah,
we'll find out more about LEAP Mindanao, which is the initiative of Pat and his group. We have to take a short break for now. Legal Help Desk will return after these messages. You're still watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel with our guest, Attorney Patrick Costello of LEAP Mindanao.
All right, Patrick, maybe you can explain to us what LEAP Mindanao is all about and the programs that you're providing to the people of Mindanao, and I think in other provinces as well, such as Palawan, right?
That's correct. I was in both Mindanao and Palawan during the last month. The vision of the LEAP program, as I understand it from Attorney Neil Pacamalan of the U.S. Embassy Public Affairs Section, who is the godfather of this program, it's designed to have a new resource in the form of law students to work with the community to increase access to justice and to encourage respect for the rule of law. So that people in the community will be more comfortable relying on social and governmental institutions to solve their problems rather than self-help and perhaps violence. So that's the societal goal. The other piece, as you point out, the reason why UP has a clinical program primarily is to educate law students to be lawyers, and there's no better way to do that than to have them actually practicing law. So that's the other mission. Not only are you turning out attorneys, law students who are practice ready, they come to it with a sense of satisfaction that you get from providing legal services to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford attorneys. And that carries through into their profession. We talked about ways to encourage attorneys to do pro bono work. The biggest way to do it is to have them experience it. And it's a wonderful feeling, helping someone realize the solution to their legal problem through representing them as an attorney, and then you want to come back and do more.
Do you find that there's less legal representation in Mindanao, especially access to free legal services compared to the rest of the Philippines?
I would not be competent to say, since I've only been in Mindanao and Palawan, but I can tell you, having visited with members of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, their leadership, as well as attorneys working for the Public Attorney's Office, the Public Attorney's Office is overwhelmed with, in Mindanao and Palawan, with people lining up for their services. The Integrated Bar of the Philippines operates its own pro bono program, and they cannot begin to meet the need. So having legal clinics available at law schools will be at least an additional resource to help solve that. Whether or not, I have a sense that it's particularly an acute problem in Mindanao and Palawan, but since I haven't really spent time in the Visayas or Luzon, I really couldn't say.
So what is the ultimate goal, though? I mean, I guess you have some specific goals. Are there specific goals wherein I guess you're going to measure against and find out maybe perhaps in the next 2 years or 3 years, this is what you want to achieve? Can you share those specific goals?
My sense is that currently, with the assistance of Attorney Pacamalan and others, we have gotten student-driven clinic organizations going on a volunteer basis at 4 different law schools. And the goal, I think, would be if in 2 or 3 years these have become institutionalized by the law schools and folded into the curriculum so that the students are receiving academic credit and being evaluated with a grade like they are for their other legal subjects. A big problem is these students, for the most part, are working full-time during the day, going to their classes in the evening and studying who knows when. Volunteer commitments are going to have to be the first to go when they run out of time. So if it becomes a course, then I think they'll give it the priority that it needs.
And Pat, do you have to train these students specifically with Sharia law, for instance? Because for the rest of the Philippines, we follow, of course, we're all required to follow the Philippine laws and regulations. But specifically for Mindanao, they also have the Sharia code. So is this something that you also train your volunteer students and lawyers?
Each of the clinics is going to have a case-type focus. So, and that's going to be driven in part by whoever is selected to be the supervising attorney. If that attorney's practice involves appearing in Sharia court, for example, they would have to be trained in that. But if they are limiting their legal work to, say, indigenous people's property rights or some other focus, it might not be necessary for them to be prepared to appear in Sharia court.
Now, once you work with these schools, I would imagine, because when I was taking law, clinical legal education was just an elective. Is the plan to make clinical legal education or clinical legal service as a mandatory subject?
That would be up to the law school administration, and the Supreme Court of the Philippines also is involved in approving law school curricula in this country. One mode of transitioning into making this part of the curriculum would be to include it in the 4th year practice court or practicum courses, which are themselves required. And then if they use that model, then everyone in their 4th year would have to spend some amount of time in clinics. In the U.S., most clinics are elective. They're not a mandatory course.
All right.
Okay, and what types of challenges did you face when you were trying to implement this program with your group?
The first challenge is the one of the students' time. They're so busy with their work and their studies. But in addition to that, it's resources. Clinics are expensive. They're very resource intensive. It's not like delivering a lecture to a room full of students where one professor can teach very efficiently 60, 70, 80, 100 students at a time. You know, at Harvard, 400 perhaps in a class. Right. Clinics are small, like maybe 12 students. So it costs a lot of money to be able to afford a faculty member devoted to supervising the students. Then you have to have everything that goes with the law office. You have to have office space, equipment, supplies, clerical support,
and of course
on
the photocopying expenses, all the documents that you need. Another question I have would be to educate the public on, if you are from Mindanao or if you have a relative or family member from Mindanao, how can you access the services of LEAP Mindanao so that they can either file something in court if they don't have enough money, or get the services of a client, of a lawyer.
All right. Currently, none of the clinics are offering direct legal services because, as I said, they're voluntary, student-driven organizations without supervising attorneys. So they're not able to provide direct legal services at this time. What they can do and what they have been doing is doing outreach, community outreach and education, where they put on workshops to explain people's rights to them, perhaps coach them on representing themselves, but they can't actually appear as their attorney in court as of right now. That's what we're transitioning to, I believe. At least that's what my hope would be.
Is there a particular focus on a branch of law? Is it more criminal or civil, or is it commercial dealing? Or you're trying to cover everything?
That remains to be seen. I've been asking that question of the students at all of the schools I've been to, and they run the gamut of interests from indigenous people's rights to women and children in domestic violence case to criminal defense, you name it. But they will have to focus on a particular area so that the students are able to come up to speed and be competent in it. That will vary from law school to law school. I don't know what the focus is of the UP clinic, but I'm sure they have particular case types that they are that they can serve.
UP actually accepts everything,
Civil,
criminal and civil family cases, but they normally limit it to, of course, it's for indigent clients.
Right,
so if
right.
it's two corporations, or if it's obviously a very commercial transaction, then they'd rather give the services to a person who needs it more. Right?
So basically, when you go to the outreach, let's say the students go on the outreach, this involves not just imparting knowledge to the community, right? But it also involves the community being able to ask questions about their legal issues.
Yes.
And once they have that, let's say, hey, let's say my husband's hitting me, do the students then have the information to tell that particular woman, for example, to where to go to be able to access free legal services?
Yes, if they don't have it, they know where to get it. I had a great experience last Sunday. I went with a group of law students on a trek into a remote indigenous village, a Batak tribal village in Palawan, and it was wonderful to see the students there interacting with the Batak people and answering their questions, and the students got so enthused about the possibility of following up with preparing affidavits for them to help them protect their property rights. Yeah.
So if there are lawyers out there who might want to be part of LEAP Mindanao, how can they, is there a website they can go, or perhaps a number, an email that they can contact?
Well, each of the clinics has their own website. For example, the Palawan Cradle of Rights has a Facebook page.
All right.
So there's a shout out to the Cradles. If you want to go to their Facebook page and like them, they would like that very much. Okay. And the other clinics or their law schools have websites, or they can contact the law school directly and they can put them in touch with the
Great.
the
That's
clinics.
good to hear. So for all law students out there or lawyers out there, you might want to volunteer not only for LEAP Mindanao but other pro bono services programs out there. So we'd like to thank our guest, Attorney Pat Costello. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much,
Well,
Patrick.
thank you for having me.
Thank you. He's an associate professor at the University of Idaho College of Law and volunteer attorney for LEAP Mindanao. And thank you again for being with us tonight and explaining their organization and their work for Mindanao and Palawan. Legal Help Desk will return, so stay tuned. You're still tuned in to Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel. In relation to the legal services provided by LEAP Mindanao, we will now be discussing pro bono services provided by the Public Attorney's Office. And we are joined by Attorney Howard Areza, Public Attorney 4, Head Executive Assistant for Mima Ropa. Good evening, and
Good evening,
thank you for
Attorney
being
Howard.
with
Hi,
us
good
tonight,
evening. Thanks for
Attorney.
having me here.
Thank you for joining us. Ngayon, of course, this is something of interest to a lot of Filipinos. As we know,
Kasi
di ba?
lahat sinasabi
lahat.
pagka kailangan nila magdemanda, naku, mapapamahal pa ako
Oo, wala
kasi
akong pera.
magbabayad pa ako ng lawyer, ng legal fee. So maybe we can
explain.
start with, unang-una, who can get free legal services from the Public Attorney's
or what we
Office
call
or
pro
PAO.
bono, or what we call pro bono services. diba?
Yes,
For legal
well,
services.
generally because the Public Attorney's Office is the principal law office of the government in providing free legal assistance to indigents in criminal, civil cases, and administrative cases in courts and in quasi-judicial agencies.
So kasama na dun yung NLRC.
Yes.
NLRC, Department of Labor,
Yes.
pagka quasi.
Opo.
Okay.
Tapos so anyone basta indigent po siya, and then of course we have to qualify them so
Yes.
that
Yeah,
O
I
ano
think
ba ang indigent, no?
well under our rules, if you are in Metro Manila, your income should not be more than 14,000 pesos. So that is individually. So
Per month.
hindi family. Kasi minsan may mga nagkakasuhan, mag-asawa. So we have to consider the income of the wife or the husband. And then in outside Metro Manila 13,000, and then in other municipalities 12,000.
Ito po per month? Or-
Yes.
So anyone earning less than that, then you're considered indigent.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
And then what do you need to bring with you? Kunwari, you go to the PAO.
Well, we require basically yung most na binibigay is yung certificate of indigency from the barangay, and then this WD certification, and then usually if there's a proof of income, like the pay slips or income tax return. So basically, usually the barangay will be sufficient, the barangay certification.
Well, that's it. And then, of course, and then after that, they'll explain their case. How do they go about it? Do they go to the PAO office in their respective town?
Yes.
And city hall, and then
Yes.
and then is there normally an officer of the day there that will parang vet yung case nila?
Yes.
How does it work?
In each city municipality where there is a regularly constituted court, there's always a public attorney's office there. So yung magkakaso, pwedeng pumunta dun sa mag-walk-in lang siya, and there's an officer of the day, and we observe the no-noon time break policy. So even if
during
there's
lunch break.
even during lunch break, there's always a lawyer who will assist them, interview them regarding their legal problems.
And how is this different? Kasi meron namang, again, costs associated naman with legal fees na ifa-file mo, filing fees sa court. So, is it necessarily the same standards that the court uses for considering someone as an indigent litigant? Kasi kunwari ako, if I file a civil case against Rod, pag-file ko pa lang ng complaint, based on the amount of the complaint, magkakaroon na ako ng filing fees na ibabayad ko pa sa court, na separate pa yun sa abogado. So, under the rules of court, pwede rin ako ma-exempt doon. But if it's me litigating as an indigent complainant, for instance, pareho ba yung standards ng court and also PAO in terms of getting free legal services and getting exempted pa from the filing fees?
Actually, with the passage of Republic Act 9406, that is the PAO law, in-exempt na lahat ng basta client ng PAO, in-exempt. And then this was recognized by a Supreme Court Administrative Circular that was issued, I think it's in 2007 or 2008. So, ni-recognize yun na pag may client ng PAO, automatic na, exempted na yan, basta magpa-file. So, there is no need to file any filing fees in, for example, civil cases. However, if there's a judgment, I think the court can, it will be a lien on the filing fees.
Now, how does it work if both parties, the plaintiff and defendant, are both indigents, and therefore, in this case, let's say, can PAO, for example, represent both parties, and is that a conflict of interest?
Yes, exactly. That would be a conflict of interest. So we observe the first come, first served basis.
So, kailangan nyo i-turn away. Kunwari, ako na una ako lumapit sa PAO, and then later on dumating si Attorney Rod. Kailangan nyo na siyang sabihan na.
We will decline, they will decline, because
Ano
there's already an
magiging-
attorney-client relationship between us. We will have to decline you, and we will endorse the usual procedure. We endorse it to the IBP. Because the
Okay.
IBP also has their own
Pro
free
bono,
legal
program.
aid clinic.
Also, some law firms, do you work with private law firms, for example, in developing the pro bono system in the Philippines? Or is it you're purely on your own and you
Yes.
don't really work with the private law firms?
No, we work on our own because we are prohibited from assisting a client who's already represented by a private counsel. Because that means he can afford one, so there's no need for us to represent him.
But yung program ng, di ba, most law firms, like I worked before for a firm, no? And I was handling some cases, probably around 5 to 10% of my cases were what we call number 6. They were number 6, meaning they're pro bono yung mga pro bono programs of law firms ba, do you work with them to exchange notes or basically kanya-kanyang mga law offices have their own program?
I have not come across with our office working with another law firm regarding pro bono cases.
Yeah, I think that's the case,
Yeah,
Ron.
it's
I
a
also was
case-to-case,
with
no?
our pro bono committee sa law firm before, and I was working on pro bono cases, but it was just with the lawyers of the firm.
Yeah,
But
they-
I've also worked with PAO when I was working with children in conflict with the law, and parang
that's right.
puro PAO lang din yung katrabaho ko when it comes
The reason
to
why I asked that is because obviously if I'm a defendant and the plaintiff's already being represented by PAO, I want to be, apart from IBP, I want to be able to kind of find out where else I can go. But I mean, apart from PAO, where else can I go as a defendant in
Yes.
case the plaintiff who filed the case against me is already represented by the PAO?
Well, usually it's the IBP, and then we also endorse the client to the UP Legal Aid.
Office of the Legal
Yeah,
Aid.
okay.
Yeah.
Aid, yes.
UP, very active talaga.
Yes, yeah.
Usually it's only those two that we usually encounter. We endorse the client there.
Attorney Howard, what about litigants naman na in the course of the case, biglang tumaas yung sweldo? Do you eventually have to let them go and basically handle other cases? So, kunwari, una indigent siya, tapos the husband or wife became an OFW, so lumaki yung kita, lumampas sa income bracket. How do you deal with those types of clients?
Well, in those cases, usually, we find out actually when the other party complains that the circumstances of our client have already improved, the financial ability. So we usually verify that, and then if it really appears that the client's financial circumstances have already improved, that he can already hire a private counsel, we will withdraw from the case and inform the client.
So they have to look for another lawyer.
Now, in this case, for example, if it's a criminal case, it's really the people of the Philippines, or in a way, the government filing a case against an accused, diba? And then that accused, let's say, is indigent, and you have to represent him. Is there, again, a conflict of interest because the plaintiff is effectively the government or the people of the Philippines versus an accused, and you being part of the government, you're the law office of the government, you're now defending the accused. No? How does that dynamic work? Is that possible?
Yes, because there is really no conflict because it is already our mandate. The government, there's already the Republic Act 9406, which mandates the Public Recorder's Office to represent indigent litigants. And in fact, we are an attached agency with the Department of Justice. And so there's this notion that there is a conspiracy between the prosecutors and the PAO because we're under the DOJ.
Yes.
But that not really doesn't happen because our lawyers really represent our clients to their fullest of ability.
Again, as a lawyer, you take an oath to defend
Yes.
your client. Diba?
Yes.
Attorney
Paying
Howard, at this point, maybe you can clarify to our viewers there kung ano yung differences. For instance, obviously if you're filing mga civil cases, then you have to look for your own lawyer. Pero kung ikaw naman yung accused in a criminal case, you're obviously forced to, you're summoned to the court, you get a subpoena or you get a warrant of arrest. So in that case, ano yung differences that people can expect na kailan ka a-assign na ng court by force na if you cannot afford a lawyer, ito yung i-assign sa'yo. As opposed to having to look for one, actively looking for one from the PAO or approaching the UP Office of the Legal Aid.
Well, usually in civil cases, when the client receives a subpoena or summons, they usually come to the office, and then the same is assigned to a lawyer who will prepare the answer or any other appropriate pleading to be filed in court. Now, in criminal cases, once specifically in detention prisoners, automatically, if the client has no means to provide to secure services of a lawyer, it is the PAO who will be assigned as a counsel de officio. But except in cases of BP 22. There's a prohibition of
Ito yung bouncing checks law.
Yes. So there's a provision from our office from representing BP 22
Really? Okay.
cases.
Why is that?
So there's a presumption that the client can afford the services of counsel if he can open a checking account. Yeah.
Okay.
But if they can prove na wala silang pera, is it something, or exception talaga yung BP 22 cases?
The exception to that is that if the court assigns the lawyer to be the counsel, the official, in court.
Okay, so sa madaling sabi, if you if you have a relative out there and or a family member or a friend na naging accused in a criminal case and they cannot afford a lawyer, they only have to go to court and attend the hearing, and the judge will appoint counsel for them.
Well, even before the hearing, they can come to the office and they
Of
can
PAO.
yes, and they can consult a lawyer, and then the case will be assigned to the lawyer, public attorney assigned to that court where this case is pending.
Now, I know in the ideal world, of course, you've all taken an oath to defend your client, no? Paying or not, no? To the extent possible and to the best of your abilities. Pero the reality is there are a lot of indigents out there, I would imagine, who would apply in the PAO's office, and I would imagine that you have X number of lawyers, limited number of lawyers. My curiosity lies on capacity. Like for example, one lawyer in your office, how many cases is he handling at any given time? And if there's a lot, how do you ensure the quality of the service, the legal services provided?
Well,
to
at
these indigents?
in any given month, an attorney can have around 400 cases a month. Sometimes there are 800 cases. But they can manage because in court, there are some, for example, in the regional trial court, there are 10 cases. So they're always ready to handle those cases. Because, and in fact, if you will notice the public attorney's office, the public attorney will come there. They will only have the court calendar. They will always be ready. They will just read the records of the case, and they can defend the client automatically. They know already how to proceed.
They know how to do
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Howard. I think it's comforting for all our viewers out there to know na even if you don't have money to pay for lawyers, we have what they call the law firm of the government, which is the Public Attorney's Office.
Okay.
So thank you for your service, Attorney Howard.
Maraming salamat, Attorney Howard. Yeah.
We'd like to thank our guest, Attorney Howard Areza, Public Attorney 4, Head Executive Assistant for Mimaropa, for being with us tonight and discussing the services provided by the Public Attorney's Office. Maraming salamat po, and I hope you continue the good work.
Thank you.
Legal Help Desk will return after these reminders. Welcome back to Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel.
Yeah,
And
that was an
today we
interesting
had-
conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, Attorney
It's,
Costello.
I guess, and of course with the PAO, Public Attorney's Office, which happens to be the biggest law firm in the Philippines because
Yes.
they're basically the law firm of the government, and they provide pro bono services for all Filipinos who are eligible, meaning hindi enough yung income. So this is really, we have very good information today for those of you out there because, again, this shows na yung justice is not only for those who can afford it. It's really for everyone. And if you cannot afford lawyers, the government makes sure that you have access to lawyers through the Public Attorney's Office.
Yeah, and of course, you just have to prove that, of course, there are certain qualifications. You have to show that you can afford it, and you have to show that you're indigent. So there are certain income brackets that are kind of the basis in determining if you are indeed indigent or not. No? So, but of course, you have to apply.
Yeah,
You have
and
to
when
apply
in
for
doubt,
them.
just go to
Yeah.
a Public Attorney's Office and apply for them to represent you. Anyway, they'll ask for the requirements, and then you'll find out. And also, if they already are representing you, and eventually your income rises, meaning hindi ka na considered indigent by their standards, then you will have to look for other lawyers to represent you.
Yeah, and then yun nga, yung Public Attorney's Office is available in almost practically every city hall that's in the country. No? So there should be, that's part of the law, no? They should be able to provide you with an office, a Public Attorney's Office. No? So,
And just for the information of our viewers, you have to think of the Public Attorney's Office as also sort of a law firm pa rin. So they're covered by the Code of Professional Responsibility that applies to all lawyers, meaning, as an example, kunwari, they're already representing someone na in conflict with you, meaning kunwari, nauna na yung isa na i-represent as a client and then the case is involving you na kabila naman, nakalaban nitong other person, then they can no longer represent you because of a conflict of interest. But never fear kasi there are other institutions that also provide pro bono services. Just as an example, we have IBP, the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, or the UP, University of the
UP,
Philippines,
magaling dyan.
Office of the Legal Aid, yes.
Yes.
And they pretty professionally handle. And of course, you mentioned before your former law firm.
Yes.
They also have a pro bono team.
Even
So,
private law firms
yeah,
have,
so look at,
ano,
private law firms, maybe they can provide pro bono services.
And it's also important to point out, no, na if you are being represented by the PAO, the filing fees are waived, no? Kasi usually may filing fee when you file a case. So na-waive yan if you are represented by the public attorney's office.
Because the presumption is you're indigent nga. You cannot
Yeah.
afford lawyers, therefore, also you cannot afford legal fees.
And it covers both civil and criminal cases. Ayan. So those are the kind of like the key points that we learned for this evening's discussion. All right. So now over the week, we received questions from our viewers on topics we have previously discussed. Vic tweeted, "My wife died and left stocks in a hospital amounting to 250,000 pesos. How can I transfer this to our children or to me?" All right,
Okay.
so shares of stock.
Yeah.
Ayan.
So again, this forms part of the property of your wife, meaning as soon as she dies, this forms part of her estate that will be left to you as the spouse and to your children. So what's going to happen is that you have to divide the properties among yourselves. Ito-total muna yan, kung ano yung mga properties.
Hindi
And
usually individual assets. Dapat you take everything as a whole, then you put a number in that whole. All right, and then of course you have to get your share first. In your absolute community property nyo, you have to split that. 50% of that goes to you, and then 50%.
Yeah. Siguro just to give an example para ma-visualize niya. Let's assume na yung properties ng wife mo overall, pag pinagsama-sama na yung shares of stock sa hospital, mga kotse, yung bahay, it totals 1 million pesos. So, kung meron kayo absolute community of property, wala kayong prenuptial agreement, you were married under the family code na 50-50 yung hatian talaga, kasi yun yung default, then 500,000 will go to you. 500,000 is the amount that will be divided among you and your children. So, for you, yung 500,000, you will have a share equal to each of your children. So, let's say, so estimate would be around 170,000 each. So, you can decide whether for you, instead of getting the 170,000 or the half na 500,000, what you can do is just basically get maybe 170,000 worth of the shares, and then the rest would be yung share mo pa, since sobra yung 250 na value, other kids can also get a certain amount of the hospital shares as their share dun sa mana nila.
Yeah. Okay. So all right.
Our
Hopefully,
next-
we want to answer that question.
Yeah. Our next recap question is from Flora. If a child was given to a particular couple without legal adoption, but carried their names as parents all his life, including baptismal, birth, and school documents, does the child have legal rights for the couple's properties?
Okay, this is a little bit tricky, no? Because obviously when you have a birth certificate and a baptismal certificate and all types of certificates, no, confirming that he or she is a legitimate child, there's a presumption of regularity. All right? So technically, yes, he can inherit, but in reality, if someone questions it, if someone questions the fact that that the child, for example, was just yung foundling lang, tapos you registered that child as a legitimate child in the birth certificate, all right? So again, technically, if no one questions it, it should be all right. But if someone questions it, then that's a problem.
But I'd like to qualify Rod's statement. Yung pag-question ng tinatawag natin filiation ng bata or yung relation niya dun sa parents or yung status niya as a legitimate child, illegitimate child, or only a foundling. Iba kasi ang foundling from adopted eh. You cannot do that collaterally, meaning hindi mo pwede i-mention lang dun sa intestate proceedings or yung dun sa hatian ng mana na, by the way, ito hindi to totoong anak.
Yeah.
You have to do it directly, meaning you have to file an action questioning the filiation of the child, meaning it's a separate case na ifa-file nyo talaga sa korte that will prove na hindi ito tunay na anak
Adopted,
ng
hindi
parents.
adopted talaga.
Na hindi man lang adopted. Because adoption under our laws right now gives them the right to inherit from the adoptive parents as if they were legitimate children. Pero ibang story kasi pag founding, kailangan through the legal adoption process. Kung hindi, they are basically strangers to that parent, meaning to the parents. So, hindi sila pwedeng magmana like as if they were a legitimate child.
Right. Okay. All right. We have also received comments from our viewers on our show. Talk tweeted, the show is interesting and engaging, expert resources, probing questions. Hosts had viewers in mind. Hashtag LegalHD. All right.
Ah, nice. Very
Thank you
nice
very much.
comment.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
All right. That is all the time that we have for tonight. We would like to thank all our viewers who send us their legal questions via social media. Now, if you have any questions or comments on tonight's episode, you may send these to our Facebook and Twitter pages. I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. If you have missed any of our previous episodes, you may watch these at your convenience, anytime, anywhere, by downloading the Solar News Channel app from Google Play and the Apple App Store. Join us again next Monday as we discuss your legal rights. Good night.